go as the last few lunchers filter in. So a couple housekeeping things. One is, again, if you still have your swag tickets, we're going to have a break after the next speaker. Definitely go to the swag booth and get rid of them, even if it means just giving them back to us in exchange for a charity donation. Second housekeeping thing, and this is probably the most important thing to know for the afternoon. During the breaks, so I think we have a couple more breaks, you have the opportunity to challenge our boss, our CEO, Rob Hone, at a game of Tetris. There's a TV set up back there. It's all ready to go. I don't know. Yeah. Is he good? Is he good at it? I don't know. I think he's pretty good. So, anyways, it should be fun. Give it a shot. I definitely want to see some people playing it. So, okay, so we're moving on. Next speaker. This speaker I first met in 2013 in Austin.
You made us both old. Thank you.
At South by Southwest at the time. She was with the state of Michigan, who was one of our first state government clients. They were trying to figure out this whole idea scale thing and how much time it really took to manage it. And this speaker pretty much took the whole thing on her own to make it a success. I don't know how much she's going to talk about that today, but that's kind of when we started to see how special she was. And then she moved on. So a year later, we worked with her again. We spoke at South by Southwest. We had someone from the White House Innovation Program on a panel with her. It was kind of a real good time. And now she's at the University of Michigan. She leads their social media. And so she's coming to us from the state of Michigan. And I wanted to welcome Nikki Sunster.
This is my theme song? This is awesome. Wow. I think I'm too young to even know what that is, honestly, but that's okay. Sorry. Somebody let the millennial in the room. And so that's honestly kind of a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And since Josh gave me a warm welcome, we'll skip all of this good jazz, and then you can read the program and stuff like that. What does a director of social media actually do? Especially when she started in state government, because that's an unheard of profession. And still in a lot of venues, it really is. And I go a lot of places and speak a lot to say that we need to kind of change the perception of what it is that we're doing and make it tangible. I do communications in a truncated form. And that's essentially how all of us are now beginning to operate, because the largest generation since the baby boomers has taken over the workforce. And they have the attention spans of goldfish. And that's a scientific fact. 6 seconds or less is all that you get. And somehow you have to, I work in the higher education environment now. Students are a large demographic of the people I'm trying to reach out to on a daily basis. And if I can't pull them in somehow, how on earth am I going to get them into an idea scale community where I want them to actually cultivate a conversation with me? So here's where I usually start. I start saying that social media is not new, and in order to validate my student loan payments, I talk about this history lesson because that's what I have a minor in. And so does anybody know who this is? It's Martin Luther, right? You'd be surprised at how many places I go and no one does. So in the 15th century, the Gutenberg printing press had just been created. And the BBC did this excellent documentary talking about how when the 95 Thesis was wrote, its original intention was not to split the church. However, it went viral across Europe, across the country, in 2 months. And that was absolutely unprecedented because now they were printing pamphlets. And so I liken that to today's 140-character tweet. Right now, we know that anything that we put out into the social sphere has the ability to have a global impact nearly instantaneously. And so when we're using these ideation tools or these community tools to have a dialogue, we have to, one, figure out a way to draw the eyeballs, but two, be prepared for the consequences of the content that we put out. coming to the University of Michigan, I kind of kidded with Jessica. So when I left, I abandoned my little idea scale baby at the state of Michigan, and it was a fantastic, dynamic community. But one that sadly, because of bureaucracy, shocking, was not seeing its full potential. And that was very frustrating. And I got to the University of Michigan, and I had a lot of house cleaning to do. And a year into my tenure, I finally found the opportunity for IdeaScale, which I'm very excited to share with you today, but actually just launched on Tuesday. So when you're looking for big numbers, we're not quite there yet. But it's actually quite different than I think what even some of you have talked about today. So you'll have to let me know if you think I've bitten off more than I can chew. So this is kind of, oh, and it looks funny on here. I had this in a nice font for you and all this kind of jazz, but that's okay. One of the things that I always like to say, and in my world, right, from a social media perspective, I don't view IdeaScale as a social media tool. And I think that's very important, is that I remove that from the quality of conversation that you can have on something like Twitter. And I think the speaker before lunch did a great job of saying, there's a certain subset of things that we can do on Twitter, but we can do much more within this type of community. And the dialogues that we can have and the people and the minds and the ideas that we can tap come from those that are most passionate about the issue. And even probably within your organization, but particularly in bureaucratic ones, the people that are being paid large sums of money to change something usually aren't the people that are most passionate about the issue. And so they have the likelihood of typically telling people what they're going to fix on their behalf. And then we've got a whole bunch of people sort of outcrying and saying, you're not doing anything about my problem, right? Everybody kind of sees this. And so using IdeaScale, you're able to bring those people in, increase transparency, and have that open dialogue to actually make tangible change. So I will hate this name until I reach the grave, but we called our first IdeaScale community Bureaucracy Busters. And it was about dumping the dumb stuff and cutting red tape. Yes, right? They thought that was very cheeky for government. Here was the problem. You have a traditional workforce that's very senior in leadership. And so when they saw that, that was too cheeky for them, and then they looked down upon it. All of these cultural norms that you have to get over when you're looking to innovate. But we have 64,000 state employees in the state of Michigan. And during the first implementation, we opened it up to everyone. And we said, all right, come here. It's a part of a good government initiative. We want to begin to show process improvements. We want to hear your ideas for the different things that you're encountering every day. And then we want to work with you in order to create change. We had, let's see, I want to make sure that I get these numbers correct, 2,000 ideas within the first couple of weeks and 134,000 votes. And so we had lots and lots of participation, but then the waves subsided and everyone went, well, what are you actually going to do about it? And that was a huge issue for us because when our plan was originally rolled out, we said, we're going to allow you to vote. We're going to have you come in, we're going to pick things. Well, there was only 3 that got selected. And while they were outstanding ideas, to continue the buy-in, to continue to engage people and have them come back, we found ourselves quite shocked and unprepared. And so there was a lot of lessons learned as we moved forward, and a lot of things that I think we could have done better that I'm hoping to do now at the University of Michigan. So the lieutenant governor is the individual that sits here. And this was his initiative. He owned it. Top or executive leadership, I think, for this type of tool is really very, very important because you want everyone else to know that you're giving it a certain level of resources. I loved that all of the commanders within the individual bureaus have been tasked. Getting that type of buy-in is really very difficult. I've experienced. And in the state of Michigan, when we told directors that they were going to be responsible with actually evaluating some of those 2,000 ideas and then just giving them consideration, they were extremely offended. I have a full-time job. I shouldn't have to mess with this ideation stuff. And so you have to create that cultivation among even your executive leaderships. Otherwise, what you run into with these communities is that you have all of this really great stuff and nothing gets done with it, and that will kill your initiative extremely quickly. Has anybody else ever dealt with that? Yeah? Okay. So, preaching to the choir. One of the things that did come about of this was a lot of really great press, which I think from any organization standpoint, when you look like, especially when you're usually in the news for doing bad bureaucratic, money-wasting programs, we were going to help people and we were going to make a difference. And thankfully, there was never a follow-up article to this front page spread that said, oh, guess what? They really didn't. Shh, don't tell. But we did recognize these 3 winners that still have impact in today's state government. So, they still kind of see it as a good deal. But things that came from the frontline employee, that was a problem that we had in state government that we didn't typically, we had some suggestion boxes, we had intranets, we had other little mechanisms, but nothing that allowed you the ability to go straight to the top. In the state of Michigan, in civil service, actually there are predated sort of rules that say you can't talk to the supervisor 2 levels above you, right? We're dealing with, it's some really old school mentalities. It's crazy, don't even get me started. One of the reasons why I left. But with these things, we had a lottery. The individual here on your left side was a lottery employee, but he was new to the state of Michigan. And if you've ever been, well, anywhere really, it's a very saturated campaign, but the Pure Michigan Tourism Campaign is a multi-million-dollar campaign, the most recognized globally in the world. And on these beautiful images that you would see on billboards and digital advertising, that enticed you to come to Michigan and visit these very dynamic destinations, none of them told you where they were. Not one. And so unless you were already in Michigan, how were you actually? And this was seriously something that was completely overlooked. Millions of dollars were spent. And so this lottery employee who was new to the state and had just got married, was like, my wife and I were really excited to explore Michigan. Here's my idea. Could you tell me where these places are so we can actually go? Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. And so now, if you travel anywhere and you see a Pure Michigan billboard, they do, and there's a chair in your way. This one says Miners Beach Falls. It now includes the location. And so for us, that was a huge opportunity to say, somebody so far removed, something that really seemed like low-hanging fruit, just by opening up that dialogue, we were able to get these dynamic ideas and say, okay, yeah, gosh, that's really, really fantastic. Why didn't we think of that before? And so it doesn't always necessarily have to be a prize-driven competition, I feel like. At least that's not my approach all the time to Idea Scale. It's about cultivating a dialogue that opens up the doors to get people to talk to each other and vet through things, almost to solve it themselves. Because in the state government I worked in, I didn't have money to give prizes like that guy that talked earlier. So I'm like, what government do you work in? All right. One of the other things that I think was really fantastic was this idea that became known as too many passwords. This is actually, so in the state of Michigan, we have a Department of Technology Management and Budget. They're supposed to handle password security, and they send you those super annoying emails. It's like, change your password every 6 months or whatever else. This document that you're looking here is a list of 37 passwords with the corresponding accounts that he had printed and taped to his computer. Password security. Because this is the problem that we'd created by telling people you'll be safer if you create lots of different logins, and we're not going to allow you to have the same sort of credentials, and you have to change them so frequently. I know my mother is a director within state government, and she actually has because she's old school, she has a binder with tabs that has her passwords listed in it, because within that same process, you can't use, this is so ridiculous, you can't use the same password that you have created within the last 6 months. So even if you have to change your password every month, you can't use the last 6. it's really convoluted. Like it was just absolutely insane. And so this was an idea that people, of course, jumped onto. Like, oh gosh, yes, please solve this problem. And this was actually an IT person, so at least he was in the same sort of venue. But he'd been saying this for a very, very long time, and no one was really doing anything about it. So the fact that we had that executive leadership again that said, is this real? Does this really happen? And everyone's like, yeah, all the time. Like, we have this problem everywhere. And so we saw other things kind of come about where we talk about how fast-paced things move, and a year in state government is extremely quick. But people that touch the paper every day, that really know how things change, when they feel that they have the opportunity to actually speak up, that gave us a huge advantage in the venue. But again, like I said, if you don't do anything about it, then you have an issue. Here's another thing that came about as a result of all of those ideas. We began hosting live town halls. So rather than the prize, rather than the 3 ideas that did get recognized and the individuals got like these leadership coins, which is a very big deal in state government, that are gifted to you, we brought people into an auditorium type setting and had open dialogues about the different cultural issues that were happening. There's some things that you can't solve like through a lean process improvement. There's some things that take time, and we wanted to say we're here to like listen. And so that was a whole different spin-off of ideation. We started regular dialogues. You could come in from across the state. We have many offices all over the place, but just a different mechanism to recognize the importance of our employees' feedback and then try to change perceptions. Your captive audience are your best advocates if they actually like their job. I always say when I'm talking about social that for organizations or brands that talk 80% about themselves and only use 20% of user-generated content, like nobody likes the individual that always talks about themselves. We all hate that person. And so in the same manner, you should be publishing only 20% about yourself and then allowing other people to say how fantastic your brand is. Going back to the millennial demographic, they trust their peers 95% over brands. I get my hair cut at the place that my best friend gets her haircut at because she told me about it, not because the haircut place says they're the best person, right? All of this personal referral. Every time that we go onto social media and we talk about having a success with a brand or an organization. I flew JetBlue a while ago. I tweeted about it because there was free Wi-Fi on the plane, which I thought was fantastic, and they tweeted back at me. Now I'm telling all my friends, to fly JetBlue. So we brought these people into the room so that they could stop kind of like the water cooler bickering, but have that dialogue and have their ideas be recognized and heard and find value. And then that was a different way to say, okay, this is a closed out sort of eye. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about social. And I don't want to get too, if there's a network I talk about that you guys aren't familiar with, please let me know. Yik Yak? Anybody? No? Okay. Whew. All right. So we'll get over that one. The engagement in communities for IdeaScale is very similar to the way in which we have to bring people into dialogues on social media. And so once you get them there, what is it that you're doing with them? And the number one thing that I always prescribe is that we have to be telling a very dynamic story. I always use Dove as an example. And so anybody that's cried their eyes out at one of those darn Dove commercials or latched onto some sort of emotional attachment of a fan-based, story where we feel this sense of camaraderie, where we actually feel like we're valued and we can have a different message or make a change mechanism in that venue, we have to begin to do this with IdeaScale, or at least that's the implementation that I'm looking to drive. And so some of the stories that we tell from a social standpoint have to do with different games that are taking place. We had a collegiate World Series softball team this year. So how are we telling the story, not just of they're going to the big game, which is great, but talking about the different, that our softball coach is the most winningest collegiate coach in all of NCAA history. right? And we're talking about the ways in which she empowers young females to play sports. And did you know that softball wasn't actually a sport until, X year? All of those stories on behalf of your organization, when you put them into a community and allow feedback, I think sometimes we just have to build camaraderie and allow a little bit of, sorry to say, like fluff, right? When we were in state government, one of the things that the employees really, really wanted was a community almost where they could share their Blackboard photos, right? Like everyone would exchange, here's what my kids wore for Halloween, or I overheard somebody talking about like having an idea about what to do for a Christmas exchange. Those may not be the ROI things that you're looking for, but to keep those people coming back, if that's what they're generally interested in, acknowledge that, and then, kind of compartmentalize it to where they can actually make a difference, task them and empower them to say, yes, go ahead, that's great. It doesn't always have to be the hard science if you're not reinventing the solar car race, sort of things. Because I couldn't do that idea, but I love Christmas exchanges, so you never know. Some of the stuff that we do is that fluff. I learned the hard way when I came to the University of Michigan that they have this really super weird squirrel obsession. And it's because there's not a real Wolverine, fun fact, like around campus, and we don't have a mascot. And so all of the user-generated content, which is how I refer to anything that comes in on social, and essentially what you could call all of your ideas an idea scale, it was all squirrel pictures. And like, look, there's a squirrel club. It's this weird cultural thing. And I finally had to break down and ask somebody, okay, why is the only thing that I'm getting squirrels? And what do I need to do with this? And so now every once in a while we do have fun. And so last year for Thanksgiving, we made this squirrel look like a turkey. And that engages students. That's something that they find cheeky and fun. It's essentially a meme on our behalf. And so sometimes when you put that into idea scale just to get a conversation going, you don't have to be BuzzFeed, right? But it's okay to poke fun at yourself. Today, Snapchat announced that does everybody know what a Snapchat lens is? Has anybody seen barfing rainbows? It's like a thing. Okay. Yeah, I took that slide out because it's just utterly embarrassing. But Snapchat has went so far skewed banking on big brands, and we'll talk a little bit about them, that they kind of needed to go back and put in that fun factor. And so they created these lenses, and there's a new lens every day, and you swipe across, and then sometimes it'll give you horns, or Halloween it would make you a scary face. The facial recognition is absolutely outstanding. The funnest one, of course, is where you open your mouth and you barf rainbows and sparkles come out. But they announced today that if you want to keep that lens, because they're a limited availability, they rotate in and out, that they're 99 cents, which is a pretty small cost commitment, right? You pay the same for a song. But the internet is absolutely exploding today, if any of you are watching this. And so they have begun retweeting. They're kind of roasting themselves. And so they're retweeting all of this hate as a way to diffuse it, which honestly is absolutely brilliant, because all anybody is now talking about is how Snapchat is conducting their own Comedy Central roast of themselves. And so sometimes we have to, as brands, accept that. Like, we get that our employees are probably giving us a really crappy idea, and you acknowledge it, you move on, you go to the next thing. Or you take those nicer sort of things and you build around them. Like, maybe we do need to talk to that person that wears too much perfume in the bathroom. That was an idea that we got in our state government idea scale thing. And I honestly never understood that until on campus the other day. Open space, walking through, and it just hit you. I'm like, oh, I get it now. Get why that got so many votes. But it's a difficult HR, okay, well, that's an HR thing. We're all going to put flyers across all of the bathrooms. We'll do that or whatever. That's a low-cost commitment or investment, kind of like the Snapchat lens for your organization to say, look, we're making progress. We're doing things. Not everything is going to be a 911 call or, save a baby from a burning building, which I'm so jealous of what the New York City police get to do, because that's real change. Some of the other things that we have witnessed, and one of the reasons why I really value the Idea Scale community, everybody's here as a Facebook user? Hate it. So I got the state of Michigan on Facebook in 2009, and I like to say that when that happened, it immediately became uncool because government never does anything cool. So honestly, that probably applies to IdeaScale too, so sorry. But it is the most volatile community that we currently have, and I spoke with somebody earlier, I forget where you went, who went to OSU. So this will make sense to you. I could put up on the University of Michigan Facebook page that we just cured cancer. And the very first comment would be, go Buckeyes. And there's nothing I can do about it. And so my team has worked very, very strategically over the course of the last year to try to change that dialogue. And when you are known, and some of you from California will get this reference too, because my cab driver, it's all he wanted to talk about from the airport. We now have Jim Harbaugh. And so, you know, he's football Jesus, and he's done a lot of really great things for our program. But if I put up an image of him, it gets, and this is a true stat, it gets 6,000 likes in 8 seconds. Cure cancer, go Buckeyes, Jim Harbaugh. And that's great. I mean, different content works in different ways. And all of it's great for our end game of growing a community. But when we want to be a research institution and not just known for a game day win or loss, that's really very difficult. And so I have to evaluate what communities are better set for that type of content. And some of that is IdeaScale, right? Where can we have a more robust dialogue that's not just a like or a comment and then we move on to something different? One of the things that we did to try to tell that story, we have this feature here that you can see that's large called Michigan Mondays. And every Monday we feature a prominent alumni or stakeholder in the campus. And we tell this story about what their impact was. And so this individual right here is Dr. Alexa Kennedy. She was the first female African-American neurosurgeon. We timed this along with Black History Month. We made sure that it went out on that Monday. And then the dialogue that came from that was that dove moment for us. It was, Dr. Rita Kennedy saved my mother's life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. And then it was her colleague that stepped forward and said, you know what, I actually work with her. Here's her address. She would love to hear the feedback that you've given. And so sometimes within your ideation communities, it's okay to say, here's our employee of the month. Everybody tell her what a great job. We're recognizing 37 years of service. Have a dialogue. The platform and the mechanism that it has allows that to happen. You know, don't limit it. Think outside the box of how you can tell that story and engage people in robust dialogues. So this is Snapchat, and this is Ideal UGC. The student, my entire captivated audience flees in the summer. That was a hard lesson learned when I got to U of M. All of my squirrel pictures went away. It's very sad. But, you know, when you subscribe to the mentality that you should have these advocates talking on behalf of your brand more than you talk about yourselves, and then all of your venues for curating that dry up very quickly, you have to come up with a strategic way to say, keep it coming. And so this year, we did a Wolverine Summer campaign through Snapchat, which the University of Michigan in February of 2014 was the second university to launch Snapchat. Number one question that I got was, how many naked photos are you getting? I've never gotten a single one, which I really think talks to the evolution of that platform and the way in which our students love and thrive in that venue. It is the fastest growing network among 13 to 34-year-olds. And it is the best butts in seats driver for me right now to get anyone anywhere. So if I need 200 students on the diag to create a tunnel for the university president, true story, I snap that to them. I don't tweet it. I don't put it on Facebook. If I wanted them to have a follow-up conversation about what happened afterwards, I'd put them into IdeaScale. So I pick my content for the specific platform and then kind of package it all in together so that they work simultaneously. And then we do a lot of storytelling, and I'm going to show you the video. Oh, I have people? Oh, gosh, I was watching this time up here. Thank you very much. He gave me the 10. But I think some of the stats on the impact and the way in which people want to learn, I gave you the goldfish statistic. On average, users right now consume 10 hours worth of content every day. And so that content can come from a wide array of places. I mean, it is the posters you're walking by. It's your social media feeds. It could be very well idea scale in the way in which you're acting them to involve or be involved. We have to come up with a justification and a best use case to convince them to log into something else. It's difficult, right? In this, like, there's an app for everything sort of world. When you're working with the millennial demographic to tell them that they need to create another credential, they're like, well, why can't you just text it to me? I had this last night at the dinner table, actually. I'm like, I'm just going to text this to you because I don't want to email it. If email could die yesterday, I would be the happiest girl on the planet. And so in the same mechanism, we just actually, for the Michigan State game, we know that it's the largest event for binge drinking and underage drinking, essentially in the state of Michigan. Go tailgate and all that good stuff. But for the last decade, the university had been sending an email that, I kid you not, was probably 3 pages of straight text to talk about all the reasons why you shouldn't and how you could celebrate responsibly. This year, through partnership with the Office of Public Affairs, we did not send the email. Instead, we released a Snapchat story, and it had 100,000 views in 24 hours. People that actually watched it. And so, you know, the statistics around this type of storytelling and how hungry the coming generation is for it is going to change the way in which we also retrieve ideas from them. I'm in the process right now of reading the Elon Musk biography, and he talks about how some of our best inventors right now are bogged down with creating things like Facebook instead of, you know, rocket ships. And so when you want those ideas that are so profound, that's why I'm telling you, sometimes you got to balance that out with the low-hanging fruit, because every once in a while you'll get a really good one, but you're probably not going to get 1,000 right away. This is the community, of course, that I target mostly on a daily basis, in addition to fans, alumni, staff, and faculty. And this image I liken to, has anybody ever seen the one where they made the papal announcement of Pope Benedict?
2007, 2013.
Yes, and so the first one, they show the crowd shot, and there's one person with like a flip phone, which is ridiculous, but everyone's watching it, and they're consuming it with their eyes. And then when they announced Pope Francis, every single person in the audience has a phone up. And we know that 20,000 people go live every day. True stat. So whether it's Periscope or Meerkat or whatever it is that we're chasing, this is the way in which people want to get their news and their information. And this one here was the announcement of our new president. And I actually had a traditional executive thinker come to me and say, Nikki, is there a way that we can prevent anybody from tweeting the announcement before the regents say it? Because that's like their thing that they like to own. I thought I was being punked. I wasn't. I paused, thankfully, and didn't get fired like my 3rd week on the job. And I said, absolutely not. You know, we want to drive our news as much as possible and be our own news breakers, but it's okay to allow those other individuals to do it on our behalf. And so all of these things pulled into one. Right now we are in the midst, and it's a volatile time across the country, but of a huge diversity initiative. And so bringing Idea Scale to the University of Michigan, for me, I knew was a problem that we couldn't solve in 140 characters. It wasn't something I could smack a hashtag on and then everything was going to be sunshine and rainbows. So we are implementing, and we just launched on Tuesday, like I said, Idea Scale for diversity. And I'm going to play this for you real quick. Maybe I'm not. Hold on.
Diversity is appreciating everyone for the individual that they are.
Being aware of and respecting everyone's beliefs, understanding that everyone comes from a different background.
Maintaining your individuality while still feeling like you're part of something.
Yeah, I turned it all the way up here. Won't let me. Jess has got it.
Friendship is knowledge, is understanding for me.
Diversity is the opportunity to engage with others in new and meaningful ways. The encouragement to be exactly who you are and the acceptance for everyone else to do the same.
Diversity doesn't mean breaking people up into categories, but realizing the different commonalities.
Being able to accept someone's ideals, thoughts, or methods, even though they may not prove their own,
So this was our first idea scale prompt, and this is our community, beheard.umich.edu. Oh, it's because the volume's up now? I'm like, I'm really loud all of a sudden. That's the type of change now that we want to make. And so we're launching a 5-year strategic planning initiative that is going to, one, try to attempt to change numbers, but 2, address serious cultural, social, and racial issues across the University of Michigan. And that's not something I want to see play out on a Facebook page where I know that the first response will be, go Buckeyes. And so having a community like Idea Scale that elevates the perception of what you're pushing forth, that really kind of reimagines the way in which people interact with each other and allows individuals to tell us what they see as priorities is so very, very profound. And our University of Michigan president, when he announced the campaign on Tuesday, talked about how it's not an issue that we can solve alone in a vacuum, but yet we need to crowdsource, right? We need to crowdsource those ideas. And so we had open mics, and then we asked people to go to Be Heard and gave them kind of an intro to different things that are happening, and then have these 3 prompts currently up. So tell us what diversity really means to you. It's more than just racial diversity. We had speakers come in and talk about how, your brochure for this diversity summit isn't in large print, and so, that's really hard for me and my disability. Or the faculty is not representative of our student body. It's not the things that we would automatically think that it is. And so now we can make progress and acknowledge those ideas. We're also having them define what success looks like for us. This is a long end game. This is a 2025 question, which honestly, some of the feedback that we got was that they weren't happy or satisfied with that. Well, why aren't we talking about now? And so now we can chunk that out. Okay, well, let's talk about success in 5 years. But in 2025, we want to have this fixed. What do we do first? What are you going to vote to the top within the next 60 days? The last one that we have here talks about visioning. We have really tried to come to a place where we're not telling them what we're fixing, but allowing them to change the tides themselves. And so you have some ideas here. One of the things that I think is going to happen after this, and I've got to be getting right to the tail end. 2 minutes, okay. Is that I think we're going to see more and more, and I've already seen this, the University of Michigan Health System has a world-renowned facility, and they want to use it to solve internal cultural issues. So we're being really thematic about it, and we've started with diversity, which is not, like I said, a prize challenge. But they're seeing applications in, okay, well, how can we talk about from a marketing and branding standpoint how to better get people to enroll in a certain demographic? From the University of Michigan standpoint, they don't struggle for applications. They want a certain subset or type of application. They want to compete with the Ivy League. And so how do we have that conversation amongst ourselves? And that's not a public dialogue, so we can use anonymity. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I don't think a lot of people have talked about yet here today. The anonymity functionality, and I referenced Yik Yak because I have a whole bunch of slides I've talked myself out of showing. Don't be scared of it. I know some of you, I'm really very happy that a lot of you are using it or have it as an option. The University of Michigan was very, very strict about the fact that they didn't want to allow it because they thought it would be abused. And that's sort of the perception that we're getting a lot on social media right now. Yik Yak's getting a bad rap for being an anonymous application, and that terrifies people. And the problem is we're not reinventing the wheel here, and so we still need to adhere to traditional rules and regulations. But sometimes there are people that don't want to speak up because they're afraid of the repercussions on behalf of their boss. And so allowing that is vital to your success in the long run. I'm going to wrap up there because I want to be able to offer any questions and not get pulled off with some sort of stick. Is there any questions? Did I miss anything? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, go Irish.
See, I can't win anywhere I go.
So it's really interesting, extremely informative, very exciting. I know very little about social media compared to what I should know. But there are sort of, traditionally we can think of public participation we can think of civic engagement,
Mhm.
and we can think of marketing.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's just all kind of one thing now.
I blend it into education. It's what it is.
So what's happening? Are you obviously the University of Michigan still has marketing.
Mhm.
So what is this sort of in the long run sort of replacing, because we get into content generation,
Mhm.
that the graphics you're using, the ideas you're using,
Yep.
a savvy social media person can come up with some of that, but obviously the bigger the organization, more sophisticated, you're going to get more into marketing studies, et cetera, et cetera. So can you just
Correct. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the logistics of how my role is structured. Yeah. So my position is unique in the fact that it reports directly to a VP of Global Communications. So I get to go above marketing and digital and everything else. And it's my job to set best practice and policy in how we implement these coordinated campaigns or collaborations. I brought forth Idea Scale and said, here's what I think we need to use in this venue. How can you work with me to populate content? Because I only have a team of 7. I can't do it all on my own. And so one of the things that I did when I got to U of M was identified thought leaders in the marketing social space within each one of our primary organizations. So like our School of Engineering, for example. So I now have a team of 50 that doesn't report directly to me, but is just like I'm saying everyone else should do, they're my ambassadors for everything that I'm putting forth, and they adhere to the policy and best practice that I implement.
and they're not marketing people.
Mostly we're communications people. Some of them kind of are in a marcom role. Some are IT. It just depends. But that's kind of when I go back to advocating for what a social media person is, and honestly, I would love if we all just stopped saying social media and just said communications, because that's what it is. Teaching them to take onus in what they do and the impact that it has. There's no other way, and we made the joke earlier that Idea Scale is not free. Aside from social media, there's no other venue in which you can reach billions of people instantaneously around the world for absolutely nothing. It's a really big deal. And so, we have to apply strategy to that. I can give a whole nother presentation on that, but yeah. Yeah. Fight it out. I don't care. Who wants to go?
I'm actually really curious about the one in terms of, we usually think of our platform, I think most people use it, if I'm not wrong, thinking of the place where you set the initial content and then the dynamic content comes to you,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're commenting to encourage it. But in terms of some stuff you were talking about featuring people or doing other things, how do you imagine that playing out as you use a platform like this, or is it something you're going to do less in this platform? I'm just interested in how you see that use case, and something you try to do in your other marketing.
Yeah. So I think some of it is going to be driven by the individual organizations. I'm just offering it up, like I said, as options. Like, here's the full gamut of what you could consider or think of in this space so that they're not limiting themselves. There's a lot of education that needs to happen, at least in the university environment right now, around a tool like Idea Scale, because it's pretty mind-blowing for them. I was having the most ridiculous dialogue, actually. When you get an email and they're like, yeah, I tried to do this, but they said we can't do this because somebody else is already doing it. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's me, and this is the tool. Oh, I didn't know what that was. So we have a long way to go. But because of the structure of Idea Scale, there's pockets that could really become very passionate and spin off and have their own community. There's other areas that are going to want all of it in the full gamut. Some of them are going to want to use it as a better internal communications method because there's a lot of intranets that absolutely suck. I don't want to limit it. I don't want to put it in one single space. And so that's where we're at right now. Are we spitballing right now? All right, let's go.
In terms of putting stuff back out,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of specifics about how you create new content on the site, because that's something that's not particularly optimized or necessarily in your other tools.
So more of your response mechanism?
Responding and
Right.
maybe putting up a new comment of your own or something like that.
So from my standpoint, that actually is easier with an Idea Scale. The diversity initiative that I referenced that we launched on Tuesday, we had 15 million impressions surrounding all of the social dialogue that we coordinated around that conversation. There is absolutely no way that I can respond to every one of those. and half of them I probably wouldn't want to respond to because they weren't really great. And that's for a wide array of reasons. Some people not saying very nice things related to diversity in general. Some of them skeptics about the entire sort of strategic process. Within IdeaScale, that's removed. And I can say, because we've appointed an entire diversity team, you need to monitor or moderate the community, pick and choose what what really gets feedback. But again, don't reinvent the wheel. So if there's something in there that needs our public safety or public affairs attention, let's make sure that that goes straight there and they receive a response that says, we're going to get this to where it needs to go in a quick and timely fashion. Do you have money so I can give gifts?
I love the diversity video. I love how you, seems to me like you crowdsourced that content generation. And kind of curated and moderated it for IdeaScale. Can you talk about, you get the content, and then how does it become video? How did you do that? And
Yeah, this video right now lives on, so when you saw the different campaigns. If you go to the Diversity Is campaign, that video, I'm a big fan of the embed feature in IdeaScale. And so there'll be videos that live at the top of each of those dialogues so that you watch that story, you feel that emotional attachment, and then you want to engage. And that video we teed up, within my team I have 6 student interns. And they're kind of like connected all throughout campus. And so whenever we have a campaign, aside from the video, we also shot still images of each of those individuals. We put their diversity quotes, almost like a meme, right? So you see the image. They were in all of our promotion and marketing materials. So we worked with our marketing department to say, okay, here's your content, here's your collateral. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. And then my team put that into a video that we put into IdeaScale. Yeah, we do, and it's we're fortunate in the fact that right now, whenever you deal with Social, which is what, hashtag Social, we call my department, makes sense, right, social media, and whenever we communicate with somebody, and because we use so much user-generated content, it's kind of like an unwritten rule or a dialogue that we have that says this is likely gonna end up somewhere at some point, and honestly, the best part about that is then they get really excited. Like when we do our Snapchat stories, we have this thing that we call Snap Famous. Whenever if I featured you in the University of Michigan Snapchat story, you get all excited and then you screenshot it and you share it on your Facebook page and you share it on Instagram and then your mother, sister, brother, neighbor from high school are all like, oh my gosh, you're so cool, you're famous. And that's exactly what works for me. It's exactly what works, and it's one of the reasons why doing things like that, the slide we didn't get to, and I have to tell this to the OSU guy. Where are you? The University of Michigan is the only higher education institution in the nation to hold social audiences in the top 10 on every major social media platform. And that's because we're continuously curating this story and buying the collective.
Yeah, in theory, like every person that puts their content and gets in the video is another channel.
Exactly.
For your distribution. It's kind of like a meta.
Yeah.
I think, to my knowledge, I don't know too many other people. I mean, Tongle is maybe the other example of using crowdsourced content and then create like a finished product. They're doing some stuff similar to that, but I think that model is really lightweight, it's cheap, you probably paid nothing for
Exactly.
videos, and I didn't even see that as a use case for ideas.
Time spent. So one of the images that I showed at the very beginning that we didn't talk about, but talking again about Snapchat, and I swear I'll get off this stage, I'm sorry. We had, when we first launched Snapchat, we requested people to sing our fight song with us, and so to snap us their individual pictures, and then we agreed, talking about content, that we were going to screenshot, right, which was a little dicey in the beginning, but now everybody's come accustomed to it. And so we took all of those images and we combined them so that on a poster size thing that you can hand out, it sings the fight song with user-generated content. And then we put all the data and the statistics that went with it, that we got 1,000 snaps within 10 minutes. And our admissions office actually takes that into high schools now because our perspectives are like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, you guys are on Snapchat. And no other university is doing that. So how can you tie all of those different elements in together? That's the one takeaway, right? All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Break time?
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.